Good evening. I know you saw me walk past Anna Lee on the way here, so you know I'm not as tall as she is. But now I look as though I am, don't I? It's amazing what a little step can do for you. I would like to carry this around with me for the rest of my life. It is truly an honor for me to be part of this Courageous Compassion series. And as I thought about this, I wondered for myself, what does courageous compassion look like? And where have I seen it? And what would it mean to me to be somebody who lived with courageous compassion? And as I thought through my life, I thought of many people and places where I have seen courageous compassion. But the first thing that came to my mind, the first picture that I thought of and that kept staying with me and kept coming back to me was from South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation process. And in that Truth and Reconciliation process, people could apply for amnesty for the acts they had committed during apartheid. And one of the men who applied for amnesty was a police officer who had been basically the instigator of some young men in a township in Cape Town, Gugulethu, and had encouraged them to consider leaving the country, fleeing the country to become involved in the armed struggle. And the whole time as he is encouraging them to do this, he is in fact a police officer and is reporting to the police their ideas and plans. And he came to apply for amnesty for the murder of these young men. Now, the people who represented them were mostly their mothers. And the mothers spoke about going to work in the morning and then coming home from work and turning on the TV to see the news and seeing their children dead on the streets, that nobody had told them what had happened in Gugulethu while they were away. One spoke about turning on that TV and seeing not just her son's dead body on the street, but seeing the police tie a rope to his leg and then to the back of the police truck and drive, dragging his dead body, her teenage son. And so the policeman who had been the one who had not only encouraged them, but also sold them out, a double crime, if you will, came to ask for amnesty. And he received amnesty from the committee, and one of the things about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was that the perpetrators didn't have to ask for forgiveness. They simply had to tell the truth and show political motivation for what they had done. But some perpetrators asked to see whether the families or their victims would be willing to meet with them so that they could personally apologize. And this particular policeman said he would like to speak to the mothers. And some of the mothers said they were willing to meet with him. And one mother in particular, before the meeting, said, I don't care what he says. I don't care what he does. I know who he is. He's the murderer of my child. So they sat and they spoke. And they kept asking him, why would you do this? You were a black person just like us. You experienced apartheid just like us. How could you turn on our children, turn them in, allow them to be killed like that? And he kept saying, I don't know. I felt like I had no choice. But the conversation went back and forth, and eventually the woman who had said there's no way I can possibly forgive him. Listened to his story and kept looking at him intently. And then she said to him, "Your name, it means prayer, doesn't it?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "My son, my prayer for you is that you are able to live a fulfilling life." My son, to the man who killed her son. Courageous compassion. And the reason I use that as my first example is that there is a film and you can see her looking at him. She walked into that room knowing that she was going to see someone worthy of her hate and her contempt. She knew that she was going to walk in and see someone who had given up the right to ask her for anything. She walked in there knowing that she was going to see a man who was something less than human. Because how could someone with any human feeling set up young men to be killed? And she sat in the room with him and she looked at him and she listened to him and she saw and she heard a human being. A human being who was part of a great atrocity that had taken from her life. But she saw and she heard a human being, someone whom she could recognize as her son, someone whom she recognized as needing prayer. For me, that is where courageous compassion begins. In that place, in that time, in that instant, when we look and see another human being, when we listen and hear the story of another human being. Now, I can hear you all, well, I always see human beings. I always recognize human stories. I mean, we're human beings. And I would challenge you that that is part of the defense that we use. I don't look down on anyone. I see everyone as fully human as I am. When the truth is, we look and we decide over and over in many little ways in our days that there are some who are not quite as human as we. We have those we know as other for whatever reason. The color of their skin, the language they speak, their place of birth, the food they eat, the person they love, the religion they profess. In so many ways, we determine that those people are not quite as human as we are. If we are going to be those who live lives of courageous compassion, the first courageous act we are called to make is to listen to those times we judge someone as not quite as human as we. Oh, you know those people. You know how they always act. Oh my gosh, those people are always loud. They are dirty. They don't take care of themselves the way we do. Those sound like just phrases, throwaway, that we say, we think, we act on. And yet, so very often, we don't even hear ourselves making those judgments. They are so familiar to us. So our first act of courage is to stop and listen to ourselves as we judge those we know as other. As we decide that they're not quite human. And then the next step must be to then challenge ourselves to what do we do when we hear that message? What do we react when we realize that we are falling into that trap? And believe you me, I am not standing up here as some saint who never has those experiences. The reason that I am able to talk about this is because it is a reality in my own life. One of the stories that I love to tell is about oh my gosh, now it's almost 15 years. Oh my Lord, I'm growing old. Jeez. Almost 15 years ago, I was invited to speak at Vanderbilt University, where I am now a student, at their Women and Gender Studies program. And it was a series that they were having about the 21st century. What would be the opportunities that the 21st century offers to people around the world. And my particular topic was about race and gender, and what did I think race and gender would mean in the 21st century. And I was excited to be talking and was talking about how I believed the 21st century was going to be the century of people of color and women to take their place in political and economic leadership, to change the way that the world was organized, to give voice to the voices that had been suppressed, to give opportunities to those who had not been given opportunity. So I was on a roll as I was giving the presentation and was truly enjoying myself. And then at the end of the presentation, there was an opportunity for question and answers. And I looked up, and the first person looking to ask a question, and I thought, oh my Lord, no, angry white man, oh my God. I cannot deal with an angry white man right now. I'm having too much fun. And so he stood up, and he was an angry white man. But he was not the angry white man I was expecting. He was angry not because he was a white man. He was angry because he was somebody who had been marginalized in his own life because of mental health issues. and had become an activist for the homeless in Nashville, and was angry that I was giving this presentation in this place of privilege that is Vanderbilt University. Was saying, why would you be giving this presentation in this place where the people who you say this sanctuary belongs to are not welcome, where their voices are not welcome even today? And so we had a back and forth in that session, and finally the moderator had to say to him, Carl, that's how well known he is for going around asking questions at presentations. The moderator knew his name. Carl, you need to give other people an opportunity to ask questions. So he finally sat down. And the next morning I got to my office at Tennessee State University, and he was standing outside my office. He was like, you know, our conversation was going really well, so I would really like an opportunity to continue the conversation. And he gave me an envelope and walked away. And I opened the envelope, and it was his phone number, and was saying, you know, give me a call if you're willing, and let's have coffee. So I called him, and we had coffee, and our conversation was wonderful, and so we decided, let's have coffee again. And so we had coffee again the next month, and then we decided, you know, this is really good. Let's make it lunch next time so that we have more time. And so we turned lunch, and we had a great conversation, and he kept telling me that, you know, I see in you a priest, and he told me all kinds of amazing things that I said, you know, you need to stop drinking. But we kept meeting and having these conversations, and at one point he found himself homeless again, and so he moved in with me and my kids for about 3 months while he tried to sort himself out. And my son decided that this was now his Uncle Carl, who had to be invited to all his birthday parties. And I tell this story because I would have lost an amazing experience if I had stayed with that angry white man, because I knew angry white men. I knew exactly what angry white men had to say and what their perspective was. And just as an aside, Carl was the first person who told me that he thought I was going to be ordained. I'm now in the process of seeking ordination in the Episcopal Church. So I might have been saved from seeking ordination if I had not met Carl. But the fact that I too would have lost from not being able to question what it is I knew about this man in front of me. If we are to change the way our world works, it has to start with being willing to see in each person a human being of infinite worth, to believe that there is in that person a story worth telling and hearing, that there is in that person something that connects us with them. And the reason that that is courageous is that almost everything else in our world right now is telling us labels are what will save us. That if we can talk about those immigrants, if we can talk about those Muslims, if We can talk about those radical, liberal, commie, feminazis. I've heard that. I swear I've heard that phrase like that. How you're a commie Nazi at the same, don't ask me, but that's okay. But that we are told that those labels make our life simpler, that those labels explain everything that is wrong in our world because we can blame it on those others, those who are not quite as human as we, is the foundational statement that you'll never actually hear, but is at the base of that. A few years ago, now that I'm closer to 60 than anything else, a few years ago can mean anything from 2 years to 25 years to 35 years. So when I say a few years ago, just think up a number for yourself, okay? Much more fun that way. So a few years ago when the Tea Party movement was starting out, there was a series in the New York Times about the Tea Party and where it was coming from and who were the people who were in the Tea Party. And if you remember that now we talk about, that the Tea Party was started as a response to the bailing out of the banks, but actually they were very quiet around the bailing out of the banks. It's when we started talking about bailing out homeowners that it became an issue, and it was that those lazy bums who over mortgage their homes, and why should we bail them out when I'm working hard to pay my mortgage? Just to remind you, I'm always good about reminding people about historical fact. Anyway, that's an aside. But so they were talking about who were these people in the Tea Party. And one of the articles, they had a story of a woman who had become a big activist in the Tea Party movement and talked about moving around the country talking to different groups. Now, I'm somebody who had a real problem with have a real problem with the Tea Party. But I read this article and they asked the woman about, why do you do this? And she said, for some reason, and I don't know why, people need me in this movement. People need me and want me. And when she said that, that was about the first light bulb moment I've ever had in my life. First and only light bulb moment. Because who does not want to be wanted and needed? Because when I looked at what it was that this woman was doing in her life, I could not see anything that could possibly connect me to her. But I knew about being wanted and needed, and to have people believe in you. And to me, it spoke about how we who talk about compassion and care and social justice miss people who want to be needed, who want to be wanted. That I'm not sure what it is that someone like me could say or do to have her think differently about the Tea Party, but at least it made me stop and realize that her actions came from a real place of humanity. A humanity that I shared. It is so easy to see the monster, on the other side of the fence. It is so easy to see that person who's not fully a person on the other side. What is more difficult and more courageous and more compassionate is to ask ourselves, how does somebody get there? What has happened in that person's life to put them in that position? When I first started working in this country. When I was growing up in South Africa, all black people at the age of 16 had to get what we called a pass, which was a book that said where you were allowed to be and who you were allowed to work for, and it was basically directed your life. And so I never turned 16. So growing up, whenever we were stopped by the police, I was 11 or 12, right until I was like 22. It was, sometimes being petite is a positive thing. And I was really petite when I was little, when I was younger. So my first real job was here in the US, and that was the first time that I actually got a driver's license, because you needed a pass to get a driver's license in South Africa. And so I got a driver's license and a credit card all in 1 year. Amazing. And so then I went home to visit family. And at that time, it was during the 80s, and it was a time of the state of emergency in one of the state of emergencies in South Africa. And so I got home, credit card, driver's license, rented a car. And I was now on my way to show off to my cousins in Krugersdorp that I had a car. I had a credit card. So that was, at that point, we lived in Soweto, and at that point, because of the state of emergency, going into or out of townships were military and police roadblocks. And you would be stopped and they would search your car. And when you are in a situation of oppression, then you're encouraged to find ways of standing up to that oppression as far as you can go, and as small as they may be. And so one of our ways was to have as much attitude as you possibly could at military roadblocks. So they stopped my car as I'm leaving Soweto going to Krugersdorp, and I did the whole attitude thing. And I happened to look at the young man who was actually searching my car, and he looked terrified. So my first thing was, what the hell are you terrified for? Your friends are the ones with guns pointing at me. But then I just decided to engage him in conversation. And it wasn't any deep conversation about the meaning of apartheid or how if I were free, he would be free. He wouldn't have to be scared of searching a black woman's car, which I could have done, but I was not that brave. But it was just more like, you've got nothing else to do on a Friday night but search people's cars, really? Really? So we talked for those 10 minutes that they were doing the search of my car. And then I left. And this would be an amazingly powerful story if I could now tell you that I am the godmother of his children and we have stayed in close contact all those years. It didn't happen. I drove away. I don't know what happened to him. He doesn't know what happened to me, right? But for those 5-10 minutes, I know that I saw another human being and not simply a white soldier. And I believe that he too saw another human being and not simply another possible terrorist. And sometimes courage is just that, taking 5-10 10 minutes to look at someone you know as enemy, someone you know as other, and recognize a fellow human being. Sometimes that's all we can do. But can you just imagine if we all took 5 minutes of each day to think about someone we know as enemy and imagine them as someone's child, as someone's sister, as someone's father, as someone's best friend, as someone's lover. Can you imagine if we each, every day, said, this is who I am going to be for these 5 minutes. Someone who wonders at the amazing human being that he or she is in someone's eyes. I have been amazingly fortunate in my life to have had the opportunity to spend time to meet some of the world's most amazing people. People like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, like President Nelson Mandela, like Shireen Ebadi, I've just have been fortunate to have the opportunity to spend time to listen, to just be around people who have given their lives for the struggle for a just world. And one of the things that I have found to be common throughout those people is their absolute belief in humanity, their absolute belief that there is in each person something of God, and that if we can find ways to make it safe for people to express that reality, that we can change our world. I asked Betty Williams and Mayred that what made you even think about a women's movement in Northern Ireland at that time? I mean, Northern Ireland was full of crazy people who were killing each other because they were Protestant or Catholic, and there was no possible common ground. And they said that was it, that we recognized that the women on the other side were women, just like us. That I recognized that Betty was a mother, that I was a mother, that we wanted our children to be safe, to play, to be able to play on the streets of their homes, to be able to go to school, to work, and for us not to be concerned that the next news we would receive would be the death of a loved one. And so we reached out to one another based on that common ground, our shared humanity as women. Courageous compassion means being willing to be the one to step out, to make the common ground where we can recognize each other's humanity. It's called courageous because it's not easy. It's called courageous because the world would have us believe that hatred and division and envy and selfishness are the only ways to make it. It's called courageous because many who have reached out their hands in friendship have paid with their lives. It's called courageous because even though it is a beautiful thing, it is a costly way of being in the world. But the other thing that I have experienced with those people that I spoke about is that they live in joy. Not happiness, not balloons and birthday cake and all that wonderful stuff. In joy. In the joy of knowing that they are living true lives. That they are living in the way that our God designed and recognized when she said, "It is good." That they live in joy because they are living lives of courageous compassion. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, those mics over here are for questions, and we have some time for question and answers, and I would encourage you to come on up. And I was a professor in a former life, so silence is fine with me. Can you come so that I think that they're taping, so they need to have it on the mic.
Thank you for your talk. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, I think a big obstacle for me personally and for many other people in reaching compassion is overcoming resentment, whether it's a personal resentment or perhaps a collective resentment if you come from a group of people and feel that, you know, your whole group of people has been hurt by another group of people over a long period of time. So I guess just what advice would you give based on everything that you've been through and everything that you've learned? What advice would you give to people for overcoming that resentment and being able to forgive and reach compassion?
Yeah, you know, I don't think that there is a blueprint that you can follow for reaching forgiveness, and forgiveness is actually something that right now I'm struggling with, the whole forgiveness thing. I'm thinking that, and this is not answering your question exactly, but I just want to let you know so that. Because I think we need to find that there are two different things that we need to talk about. I think that there is forgiveness when somebody asks for forgiveness, that is something about being in relationship. There's forgiveness. And then there's letting go when the person is not involved, the person or group doesn't want to, you know, just let go and say, I'm not going to, you know, this is not going to color the rest of my life. But for forgiveness, there has to be relationship, there has to be repentance. This is my belief. This is not, if you ask my dad, it'll be completely different. So don't tell him I said this, okay? But that, you know, that for me, forgiveness, that there has to be repentance and to say, I'm asking for forgiveness, right? So in saying that there's no blueprint, I think that it has to be how far each person is able to go. And that's why I said it takes courage, right? Because that if you keep putting yourself out there, and the response over and over is a response of violence or of ignoring your outreach, then it is possible that you will eventually get tired and say, I've done my part of the courageous compassion. Somebody needs to step up to the plate now, right? And yet, having said that, I mean, when I look at the experience of South Africa, that people like my father kept going and meeting with the white government, even after people like me were saying, what else can they tell you? I mean, you know, they're out here shooting us. They're really, how long are you going to keep going and having the conversations, right? And the fact is that people kept going and having the conversations. Church leaders kept going and believing, and we moved to a democratic country. So there is a way that there are examples of how it can change if you are willing to put yourself out over and over. But there is no blueprint. And because I know that I'm not a particularly patient person myself, I don't think that I'm not sure that I could have been, for instance, a Nelson Mandela after all those years in prison and come out and not just forgive on the behalf of the nation, but also live that forgiveness in my personal life with those who were my actual jailers. But I am so glad that there are people like Nelson Mandela and all those other Nobel Peace Prize winners who have said, I am going to continue to put myself out, to step out in courage, coming from a place of compassion and believing that there is that place of God in you that will eventually have to recognize that place of God in me.
So understanding there's no perfect blueprint, and also that we're mostly an audience of adults, and I did see a few younger students come in, which was great. I am wondering, what is one thing you would encourage us to do to help plant that seed of courageous compassion into young children as they are growing up now. And with everything coming down to earlier and earlier ages, with exposure, with news, with openness in ways, with experiences, and that's becoming more and more challenging. I work in an elementary school, by the way. What is something you would encourage us to do to help plant that seed in young children growing up now?
You know, the truth is, I don't think it's the planting of the seed that we need in young people. I think it's the nourishing of the seed that is already there that we tend to kill, unfortunately. That the way our society is that we teach our young children that they are in competition from the day they step out of their home, that somebody is out to get what you have and you have to fight. We're talking survival of the fittest, and the mean ones rule the playground. And yet when you leave children, usually, I had one that was a biter, so I'm not sure, but that usually when you watch young children together, they negotiate. They work out differences. They talk, not talk maybe, but when you look at young children, the natural instinct is to reach out and to form bonds. And what we actually teach is how to be suspicious of bonds. So I think that what we want to come up with is ways that honor young people, young children, when they show their natural inclinations, when they show kindness to one another, when they want to work together. There's a beautiful story, and each time I hear it, it's told about a different African group. And I think it is that somebody made up this beautiful story, and then when they decided which African culture it came from, then they tried to tell it to somebody from that particular ethnic group, and that person said, I don't recognize that. And so then they moved it around the continent as people were like, but the story itself is a beautiful story of somebody taking a bag of candy and putting it at a tree, and then gathering a group of African children together and saying, the person who gets to the tree first can have the candy. And the children held hands and went to the tree together and shared the candy. And I haven't found which ethnic group it is that they're talking about, but I think that what the story is trying to speak to is that idea that if we nourish this in children, this is who they want to be, holding hands and sharing the candy, rather than eating it all while your friends look on and then having a stomachache tomorrow, So.
Thank you, first of all. It's just been such a pleasure hearing you.
Thank you.
And second of all, I was wondering, I think this is such an important subject in our world today. It's a crazy world, in case you hadn't noticed out there. And wondering, I don't know, this is the first time I've really ever heard of you. And do your group, your organization, do you have one that, no.
Not now. At some point we had an organization called Sister Sojourner, which we're hoping to revitalize at some point. But right now I'm a full-time student as well as speaking and now trying to get the Episcopal Church in Tennessee to think that they might want to ordain me. So I don't have any organization at present. No.
I'll keep you on my radar.
Thank you.
I'm not angry. I wanted to hear I thought you were going to tell us about that Vanderbilt speech you made 15 years ago, about what was exciting you as you looked. We were all had big hearts looking out on the brink of the 21st century, thinking about the wonderful things to come, and you did. And I was interested in hearing what you were thinking then, but I'm more interested in hearing what you're thinking now about the future of women and gender equality and gender equity and racial equity. That's a lot. Speak. I'll sit down.
Yes. Oh, what a long time 15 years is, right? Yeah, I mean, when I gave that presentation, it really was a time of excitement, and I believed that we were on the verge of a new world order that saw that we could not be the world that God intended as long as women were not equal, and as long as racism persisted, and that we were on the brink of listening to all the wonderful voices in the world and moving to a place of accepting that different voices can make harmony rather than necessarily leading to discord. And yeah, not so much, right? It's been a as a Black woman, it's been a scary time, and it has been, and it continues to be scary. After the Trayvon Martin case, I was truly devastated. Because when I heard that the jury was majority women, I was so relieved, because I knew that mothers could imagine their child out in the rain in a hoodie, having some man stop him in the middle of the night, right? And that was never questioned. That Zimmerman was the one who started the incident, to put it, for want of a better word. And then when the verdict came back, I realized that before they were mothers, they were white women who were afraid of Black boys. And that just, it was a terrifying moment for me as the mother of a then 16-year-old boy, Black boy. So, I mentioned that case because I think that it brings all kinds of things that are going on around race and gender in this world, and in this country in particular, into that really sharp focus, right, over the body of a dead young man. there are days when I think I'm just going to stay in bed and just forget that there is a world out there, because each time I open the door and turn on the news, there is something new that is terrible, that is around racism, that is around gender violence, that is around unfunding Planned Parenthood, that is around all manner of ridiculous things. And then I get out of bed after 2-3 days. No, I'm joking. But I get out of bed and I go and I meet amazing young people, elementary school children in Chicago who are doing Peace Jam, and I go to the north side of Nashville and find young people who believe that what they do in their community is going to change the world. And I talk to old people like my dad or His Holiness or Betty Williams. Don't tell them I call them old, please. Don't just. And who continue to be passionate about the work that they are doing and believe that the world can look differently. And then I have to be hopeful, and I have to believe that, there are enough people out there who truly believe that there is a different kind of world we can live in, and who are trying to make it happen, whether it is in a small community in Nashville or it is a worldwide platform like Pope Francis, that that has to say this cannot be the last word. And I come from a place where I was raised by my grandparents constantly telling me that apartheid is not the last word about our country. And hey, and I have to believe my grandparents always, right? So, yeah.
Question, what are, in the last 15 years, what is 2 or 3 of the most exciting things that you've seen that you think the world has gotten better? Mm-hmm. And where are 2 or 3 things that you think are good opportunities that we might just actually be moving in the right direction and make some more progress in the next 15 years?
Mm. So, oh, wow. So one, the first one that just comes to my mind is Liberia, and the women's movement that brought an end to the civil war there, and meeting Lima Bowie and hearing her story, and again, somebody who is full of joy, and is, so that would be one. Another would be going to Italy for the opening of the first children's village, which is an idea that I have heard Betty Williams talk about for a long time, of establishing villages around the world that are safe havens for children in time of war, and being at a place where a community gave over land and buildings and is supporting. I mean, a small community in Italy. It's not a wealthy, it wasn't one major donation by some philanthropist. It was a community coming together and saying, this is what we can do. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to spit at you. This is what we can do as a community to make our world better. And I mean, how more amazing can that be? And then I would have to say that the third is any Peace Jam event that I've ever been to, and seeing hundreds and sometimes thousands of young people who say that I'm changing the world, my community, and my particular activity at a time. How can you not be hopeful? And what was the second part? Sorry.
What about the future? What's good going on that you think is going to make the future better?
Well, I think what's good going on is that we have young people who make connections between their story and the story of other young people around the world. I always tell people that if my only knowledge of young people was through reading the newspapers and watching TV, I would be depressed, seriously, that because the way that it's covered is that basically all they're interested in is who is wearing whom and whatever. But that everywhere I go, I find young people who are intent on changing the world and their communities, and are not just talking about it, but are actively doing different things wherever they are. And what could be better than to know that we have a next generation that is dedicated to making the world better than they have found it?
Hello, thank you for your remarks. Moving back to your days of teaching, I'm going to invite you to give us a reading list. Are there books, whether they're poetry, plays, essays, novels, or more specific around themes of gender and race and justice, which help you to know that you're not alone in the universe, and which you would encourage us to look at?
Oh, my Lord. Not right now. Right now, all the books in my mind are either divinity books or else murder mysteries that I get into to get away from divinity books. So you don't want my reading list right now.
I'm a theology student, I understand.
You really don't want my reading list right now. But I have to say that in terms of value reading, everything I have read recently by Chinamande what is her last name? Oh my gosh. Has given me life. And it might be because she's writing as an African woman, and that just gives me life to hear the voice of an African woman. But I think that her writing is awesome for anybody, seriously. I mean, she writes big, thick books, but they're really good, and they're not divinity books, and they're not murder mysteries, so,
Hi.
Hi.
I just want to say it's an honor to meet you and hear you speak. I remember when I was a little girl, my sister and I, your father came to Trinidad, and it was like a big deal. And
Oh yeah, I saw that album, and I was like, why wasn't I invited?
Yeah.
It looked like it was fun.
It was a big deal to Trinidad. So
Oh, okay. Well, it was a big deal to them too. So.
I have a question. With your historical context, and I'm not trying to call you out as old, I'm not doing that, but you talk about living in apartheid, and even though the United States has gone through those similar issues and sort of overcome them, now there's this sort of weird political climate, and I want to know what similarities you can mention that were in the rhetoric of the ruling political party then, And if you can see any similarities in rhetoric that's being thrown around now about other and us and them, sort of, because I think we all know that's why we study history, right? That's why we try to learn from the past, and I feel like if we can sort of make that connection about the kind of things that were being said at that time and what's being said now, we'd be able to sort of look into the future and probably change it before it happens. So if you can shed any light on that, that'd be amazing.
No, I think I get you. And definitely, I mean, I do see similarities in a lot of the rhetoric, as you say, of othering and how the other is so very different from us, and that's what, and I think that's what I meant when I was saying that that there's that underlying thing of that they're not quite human the way that we are, and what I would say actually and what I do say to people in this country is that you don't even have to go to apartheid South Africa. You can simply go to this country's history to then see how frighteningly similar things are being said and done today as were in the 50s and 60s, and how I have to laugh when I hear people, saying now, well, these young people are nothing like Martin Luther King Jr., he brought people together. Read what the media was saying about Martin Luther King Jr. when Martin Luther King Jr. was alive, and what a rabble-rouser and a troublemaker and a communist and an agitator and all of those things that are being said about young people now who are leading things like Black Lives Matter. So we don't even need to leave the boundaries of this country to hear how closely we are mimicking the history. And for me, I think that it is important that we learn from other places' experiences, but I also think it's important that we learn from our own history in particular. And when I'm saying our own, I'm saying that as U.S., I do have dual citizenship, people, so when I say our, I feel like I can literally say that. I carry a U.S. passport as well as my South African passport. So, but that, that it is important that we pay attention to how easy it is to fall back into the rhetoric and beliefs of the past, and I think that we as a world are in a point of having to make a decision about what way we are going forward, and I like to tell people that there is an African proverb that says, in the time of flood, the wise build bridges, the foolish build walls. And what that proverb is saying, that in times of crisis, those who are wise build bridges, reach out, find allies and partners. In the time of crisis, the foolish build walls, try and find scapegoats, try and leave people out. And I'm not talking even about Donald Trump's wall around. I'm not even talking about that literal wall. I'm just talking about pointing out other people as the reason for the problem, rather than reaching out to find ways that we can solve the problems that face us all together, instead of trying to find scapegoats. This side, okay.
Thank you for reminding us that we are all children of God, and for reminding us when we face someone who is radically other and there's a matter of an event of conflict, that this realization can help us transform that conflict. Mm. Your presentation of that raises for me the question, is there a next step that celebrates difference, that searches for ways to find in otherness elements of life experience that can enrich our own. And I see you nodding, so I hope we both agree that as a next step, a step that goes beyond that, that this is the move from tolerance to real inclusion or real diversity or the celebration of diversity.
Yes,
So
yes.
we're okay.
Yeah, and yes, I'm with you. I mean, I'll follow you wherever you lead now. But no, yes, and yes, and because I think that part of recognizing God in the other is that recognizing that then God hasn't made a mistake in the other, right? And so, yeah, and tolerance is one of those things that just kind of like, really, no, is that as well as we can do? Really, tolerate one another? Seriously. And in fact, yes, there is a further step, and it is a necessary step. But the reason that I didn't even go into it is that we start from the place of recognizing one another as other, and then recognizing the other as also a creation of God. And if you believe in God, then God must have had a reason for having this diversity. My favorite story about that is I always say to people, because there are always people who say, well, I don't see race, I just see human beings. And I'm like, really? Because I look in the mirror and I can tell you I'm a black woman, seriously, and you're not, really, So don't pretend that you look at me and you see you, because that would be really scary, first of all. But and so I tell people about my mother, who is an avid gardener, and I say, if you were to walk up to my mother and look at her garden and say, oh, what a nice garden, but I don't see roses and whatever other names of flowers are, because I know roses and not roses, that I just see flowers. You would be manure for those flowers, seriously, because she would, she's like, this is my work. This is what I do. I choose the flowers that go next to each other, that go under the shade, the different colors, to make the garden the way it looks. And I can imagine that, I think that's how God feels when people say, I don't see color, I don't see this, all I see are human beings. It's like, this is my work, damn it. I made all this diversity because I want to see it. So... One more. Sorry, I'm sure God doesn't say damn it.
So I'm looking more for advice, and I wrote my question down before I forget it. I'm in a sorority, and part of our mission is to empower women through leadership. What are some other ways that we as a sorority and women of distinction do to empower other women?
Can you just say that again?
So what other ways as a sorority what can we do to empower women?
Okay, thank you. So did you tell me what you do already? Okay, all right. Well, it depends on which women you are looking at. So are you looking at young women? So maybe you can mentor young women in middle and high school, because I know that many young women don't even think about college as an option for them, and that to have mentors who are already in college, who talk to them about dreaming about being in college, and also about the practical things about what it means to apply to college, what you need to be doing right now as you are in school, because many young women don't have that opportunity. Or are you thinking about working with women who are economically challenged? I mean, because then I think that there are a couple of ways that you can do. One is to be looking at the policies that impact women's access to both education and good employment. And the other is, again, to be helping women who are trying to improve their skills or get access to training or to opportunities, just to even identifying opportunities for jobs, to even maybe offering to babysit so that women who put single mothers, and I'm telling you this as a single mother, that there were times when if somebody had said to me, let me take your children for 2 hours so you can read, I would have kissed that person's feet. Seriously. And that was as a middle class woman with a job. But that as somebody who is trying maybe to get a skill, to get an education, that childcare in this country is outrageous. And the number of stories of women who have been arrested for leaving their children in their car as they've gone for an interview, where were people when they were looking for somebody to look after their children so that they could go on that interview knowing that their children are safe? So, I mean, sometimes just something as practical as that. I don't know this community that well, but I bet you that the YWCA or it has programs that they would love to have young women from this university working with them to give access. Thank you all very much.